This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. Here's your host, Cory.
What's up, plebs? On this week's episode, I interviewed Hoddle Magoo. You might know Magoo from the Twitter sphere. Hoddle Magoo is a pretty active on there, and he's pretty entertaining. But I wanted to get him on because I was curious to hear his background, and wait till you hear his background. His origin story in Bitcoin is pretty cool and crazy. And then also, we talked about he was one of the few people calling the pullback in December. And so I wanted to get his thoughts on why that happened and what he sees going forward. And then also we got to talk about the Volcano Bond, because he's been very concerned about it and kind of calling things out and seeing, issues that he sees with what could happen with Volcano Bond in El Salvador. So I wanted to get his opinion on that, and it was a great conversation. The new sponsor, by the way, it is the Bitbox hardware wallet. Go to shiftcrypto.ch/Bitcoin Made Simple, and you can get 5% discount using Bitcoin Made Simple. So, and then also Movies Plus, go to mymoviesplus.com. That is my streaming platform. You can check out a couple of Bitcoin movies there at the moment. We're looking to add more constantly. So, check it out, and you can get a free 30-day trial. And if you want to reach out to the show, just email me bitcoinmadesimplepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. Your persona, Hoddle Magoo, is one of my favorites. I must say your voice really matches the character. I don't know if you get that a lot.
Yeah, that's why I picked the Magoo. And just because Magoo, if most people on Twitter actually probably haven't actually watched Magoo, because it's a rather old cartoon. And just like the whole embodiment of what Magoo is like the exact opposite of what a Bitcoiner actually is. Like, he's like such like, I guess when it came out, he wasn't even a boomer. He's like a GI generation, like grumpy, like straight edged, arrowed individual. Like, he would be like the person that would hate Bitcoin the most. Like, he's pretty much Charlie Munger, like as a cartoon. And that's why I picked it, because it's such a contrast that it's just like, to me, that's ironic and funny.
That is funny, because I mean, seriously, he's a bumbling, blind man that just walks around and finds himself into, terrible situations and gets out of it pure luck, which is kind of like the opposite of a Bitcoiner. Like Magoo would in reality probably be like a shitcoiner, but like by accident. Like he would just be like thinking he's buying groceries, and like he'd be buying like every kind of shitcoin under the sun.
Yeah, like he would go to the grocery store, and someone would be like try to advertise him as shitcoin, and like he would literally like be like, "Oh, I don't know what this is, but it sounds cool. It sounds whatever. Give me some of that."
Oh, that's good. So I think you and I connected on Twitter Spaces over the summer, and you came in with some fire and injected some life into some spaces. So you've been around for a while though, because I think you've only been on Twitter probably for a little bit, right?
This version of my Twitter, yes, has only been around since, I don't know, when I started Magoo at 2020, 2021. I don't even know. Like, I had a previous Magoo account that was banned. And then kind of once Spaces really took off, that's when I kind of really started going ham on in Bitcoin, at least publicly, for the most part, in that NIM form. So for the most part, Magoo is pretty new.
And I have a working theory that Hoddle Magoo, you were actually Preston Pish's alter ego, the very, because Preston's very polished, military, all that kind of stuff, and then you come in with the poop jokes and all that kind of stuff, and I know he gets a big kick out of it, and I mean all of us do, but
Preston's is an interesting guy. Like he's super on point when it comes to macro. He is pretty polished for the most part. He does crack once in a while where you see some more of his humor side, but that's a pretty good way to describe my personality. Is basically not the exact alter ego of Preston, but like Preston probably 12 tequila shots in is probably what I'm trying to mimic, and that's partly to do with the environment that we're in, at least within Twitter, and what people are actually looking for in terms of not just engagement, but like my first like rule of thumb is like make people laugh, right? Like it doesn't matter what you're doing or even what you're talking about. Like my number one objective is to make people laugh, but also say things that like while they're laughing, it really gets them to think, because like I find that personally my way of like getting information across, not only me giving it, but me receiving it. Like if you're laughing and you're talking about something, you're so more receptive to understanding something. And that's like kind of where my whole, like what I talk about in space is like, cause I say some pretty wild shit, and it's because people want to laugh like that. Like people aren't just here to push paper and pencil and learn about macroeconomics or about Bitcoin. Like people want to have a good time.
Yeah. No, I mean, humor, like that's why in a lot of, I mean, I'm a movie person, so like, but in movies, like you have humor in so many different types of films, and it's kind of necessary because people are always eager to. And then that's why I have such respect for comedians, because people want to laugh so hard, like so bad, but like, to get up there and perform, and like that pressure, because believe me, I've seen many comedians bomb, and it's even the best ones will bomb. Like I think Jerry Seinfeld's the only one that said he never bombed, but I'm sure he did one once upon a time. But anyways, yeah, it's comedy is important. And yeah, I agree. I think people are more inclined to engage with you. So tell us a little bit. Are you, for OPSEC reasons, are you willing to get into your background at all, like without giving names and places and stuff like that? Like, but just curious, like what you do for, what's your fiat mining and how you got into economics and everything.
Yeah, sure. No, we can definitely go on that. I kind of have went over this a few times in a pretty OSPEC positive way. So I basically started, quote unquote, my fiat mining, like my fiat profession as a software engineer, working for a Fortune 500 bank. This was over a decade ago now. And basically learning finance through code, essentially being in financial products, basically like learning finance as I was basically developing financial products, right? Like as fresh out of university, that's what kind of got me into finance. But not only that, like my family background is very deeply embedded in finance as well. Growing up, it was basically in my house, it was kind of like a not eat, sleep, breathe situation, but one of my parents is in the financial industry. And so just growing up in that, it just gave me that interest to begin with. And it just was happenstance that I started my career in the financial industry as well. And I bounced around a few different industries in let's call it engineering sakes, from manufacturing technologies to financial companies to straight on blockchain development stuff, payment processing stuff. But realistically, like I got introduced to Bitcoin super early, actually, even before I finished my schooling.
Nice.
During my schooling, I think it was either 2010 or 2011. I actually haven't looked at certain information that would tell me that, but it was winter, so it was either December or January or February of 2011 or the December of 2010 is when I got introduced to it. And it was kind of like, the story was like, we were literally finishing our final year project in university, or our thesis. And somebody who was in the same cohort as us literally came into the computer labs, and I kid you not, like kicked the computer lab doors open with, like, in the movies where they literally just kick the doors and they swing open. So he kicks these doors open, and they're kind of broken before. So they swung open, and we're like, what the fuck? And this was like 4 a.m. because, like, computer scientists and engineers were up super late working on projects. And he's like,
you come out and like a bat, like into the sun. Like, what the hell is that?
Exactly. And like, I'm about as pale as my avatar right now. So, so he's like, hey, we need to stop everything that you guys are doing, and we need to turn this computer lab into miners. And we were like, what the fuck is a miner? And this was either 2010 or 2011. And he then proceeded to explain to us what Bitcoin was, and what basically reasonable proof of work was, and how it solved the double spend problem when it comes to digital money. We were obviously predispositioned to like understand this stuff because we were in computer science. We understood encryption. We were literally working on a project that was encryption based. And so we had an inkling of digital currencies that have been tried to been developed in the past, and we already knew what the double spend was. And so it really perked our ears when we heard that someone solved, or at least claimed to solve, having solved the double spend problem. We're like, okay, we're going to listen to this crazy guy with long hair and a beard and smelled really bad. Let's listen to this guy. And so he told us about what Bitcoin. Like, okay,
did you know cool. Who this was? Or
yeah, I knew who he was. He was in our cohort, but he's not someone that was like that we hung out with. He was just in the class, right? It's not like we didn't like the guy. It's just like, in university, you hang out with like 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are in your class, and then there's so many different cliques that happen inside a given cohort. And so we listened to him, and he proceeded to show us we rebooted and reformatted one of the school computers to Linux and loaded in the mining software, and was showing us basically the hashing and all the stuff that was happening. Like, okay, this is really cool. And then one of my other buddies had an idea. Is like, well, all these computers are hooked up to this central switch in the class. We can hook into this switch and reformat all the computers in here instantaneously and load miners on these computers. And we're like, okay, let's do this. And we did that. And then we realized after one night, we're like, because this was back when block subsidies were rather large, and they were like, wow, this is really cool. We are self-mining, and we're actually able to mine blocks, right? Unlike today, which is impossible.
Yeah.
And this is cool. And then we all started really liking this. Like, this has the potential of being something that's really cool. Even back then, I didn't realize what this could be in potential as it is today, but it was just something that we were tinkering with. It was really cool. And then someone had the bright idea. I don't know who it was. I forget, to go around sequentially that night after to go to all the computer labs in the school and do the exact same thing over and over and over again, night after night after night, to turn the entire school's computing power into mining. And it still baffles to me how we were never caught, because the only reason why I don't think we were caught is because the school university's computers are based off a central image on a server that reboot every night. I think it was 4 or 5 in the morning, that would reformat the computers. Like, the image would live on the server, and it would basically reboot the computers at 5 every night in the morning with the same old image. So no one was the wiser, because it didn't look like anything happened, because, well, nothing did happen according to the people that came in the morning and logged on. So if you go there at night around 11 or 12 and no one's there, do the same thing over and over again, doing that for a few months, and no one ever noticed, you're able to mine not a substantial amount, but a decent amount of corn. So that was my introductory to Bitcoin.
So that's how you initially got introduced. And now, I mean, so the block subsidy at that point, what was it? It had to be,
it was 50, I think.
So you guys mine like hundreds of Bitcoin?
I can't say exactly how much we mined, but I think
Yeah.
there was 5 of us that ended up setting up wallets that we were distributing to the 5 different wallets back then. But yeah, we were mining a substantial amount of corn back then, and I still haven't even to this day. I haven't even contacted any of those other people that we were doing it with to see if they still have their corn. But I think I might do that and see if they still have it, because like at least I know what I ended up with, and they would have had something very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But
No, it's so messing around in the computer in the computer rooms, you end up probably getting like life changing Bitcoin in many ways. So that was your introduction to it. So you guys are mining Bitcoin on your computer, or on the college computers, which is brilliant. So essentially you were like the first mining pool.
yeah, if you, I guess mining pool, well, we're not putting in any of the resources, but
Yeah.
yeah.
The university was. You probably also never want to reveal your identity, because then the university will figure it out and go, "You owe us a portion of that." And
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, maybe, but I don't live in that country anymore. No longer a citizen in that country anymore. So good luck.
mm, yeah, yeah. They're not going to find you. And plus, I mean, I'm sure the computer fell off the boat. So, um, anyways, but so you got introduced then, and then did you pretty much like become like a full on Bitcoiner then, and saw like what was going to happen in the future, or where did you
No.
go?
So what happened was after we graduated, because this was in our final year. Or actually, was it? Yeah, it was a final year, and so when that happened, everyone just went off and I worked their own jobs. Like I went to a Fortune 500 bank, and it was a financial. It literally fell off my radar completely until 2014. Um, I think, yeah, 2014 is when Bitcoin skyrocketed from like wherever it was at the time. I think it got up to like $1,100, I think, in 2014. And I seen this and I was like, holy shit. Let me pull out a calculator and do some quick math of what I remember I had. And I was like, my God. And I'm like, and I thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? I don't even know where this wallet is that I had. Um, because I was no longer in the same region where I went to school. Uh, like I ended up, what I did was I burned it onto a CD. Yeah, I literally burned the private keys onto a CD. Uh, and I didn't have the CD on me where I was. And so by the time I could go and actually retrieve it, like this is quite a far distance away. By the time I could go back and retrieve it and actually get the information off the burnt CD, the price crashed from whatever it went up to 1,100 or whatever it was in 2014 and crashed to like 80 or something dollars. And I was like, well, fuck, I just lost out on whatever it was. It went down 90%. Mind you, like I think when we started mining, I think Bitcoin was like 80 cents or something. So it's
Hmm.
still obviously a huge increase. But that's when I thought to myself, I said, if this can go from 80 cents to over $1,000, why can't it go from $80 to $80,000? Right. And
Hmm.
that's when I really started thinking about it a lot more. And that's when I decided to actually put in fiat money into it. Because before that, it was just 100% those mining points and that's it. And then in 2014, when we crashed down and I started really thinking about it, I started actually taking my fiat mining money and started DCAing into Bitcoin back then with my own money. And I think I did that for most of 2014 and 15, um, with basically just DCAing in. And then once again, it's kind of fell off my radar because we were in a long ass kind of winter until 2016 rolls around and I leave the country. And I realized in 2016, again, like, wow, international banking is such a piece of shit. Like, I'm just trying to wire money from one bank to another international bank where I was opening a bank where I was moving. And I was like, wow, this is a disaster. And not only it took forever to get there, but they were giving me all this AML and KYC bullshit. Where's this money coming from? Like, you know where this is coming from. You know the SWIFT number is coming from a highly regulated country. This is where we need to see proof of source of funds, all this stuff, which I was happy to oblige. Like, hey, here's all my pay stubs and all my tax returns from my country that I came from. This is where, and here's my diploma. Here's my profession. Here's all the works that you need to know that this money is not me selling like who knows what or doing what and so it's money. And it was such a pain in the ass. And I was like this system is so antiquated. It's going to die. If this industry does not innovate, it's going to die. And me having experience working for a Fortune 500 bank, I know how shitty the underlying technology is behind the financial industry. Like, maybe not the entire financial industry, because a lot of hedge funds and a lot of the trade fi guys, they have some pretty sophisticated high-tech shit, but the underlying banking level software is such dog shit. They're using COBOL programming languages and IBM DB2 table databases from like 1970. It is so antiquated where they can't even get developers to work for them because this technology is just so shitty and no one wants to learn it. And so that's when I realized again, I'm like, you know what? This banking system is literally going to die. They're not innovating. And then I think that was mid 2016 or 17. That's when I left the country. And then that's kind of when I started working in my professional career full time in Bitcoin specifically, creating Bitcoin pieces of software, Bitcoin libraries, building software on top of Bitcoin, all these other things. That's when I really started taking my career 100% away from like fiat stuff to 100% Bitcoin.
So then you got into, so you're building on top of Bitcoin, basically. Are you like a core dev or?
I did a little bit of core development work. I have a few pull requests that were merged. I didn't do that for too long, mainly because I was more interested in actually building projects on top of the core and on top of second layers as well. That's just more my interest rather than just because, and don't get me wrong, like doing core development is one of the most important things a developer can do. But to me, I was just more interested in building products over top of the base layer and the second layers as well.
Okay. And I know I've heard you say before that you deal with different trades. Is that right? Like you're handling trading for big companies?
No, not like handling is a bad word. So what I do now is I have my own software company that I obviously consult other software companies. And one of the companies that I'm consulting for at the moment is a financial institution in the United States that deals with digital asset trading and custody. And so, not to give too much information, but I am basically in charge of trading system technologies. And so building out the technologies that are used to trade and to custody assets.
So then you're really behind. I mean, that's why you are pretty well versed, I guess, in security and taking care of taking care of your corn and your Bitcoin. Because God, that's got to be a lot of responsibility, I guess. Do you ever feel the pressure of that? Because I mean, everybody feels pressure in their job, but shit,
honestly, I'm pretty easygoing type of guy. Like, I have set myself up in life where I'm at, where I'm living. I live a pretty stress-free life. And so when it comes to work, I'm not too stressed out for the most part because it's just my personality not to be. Like I work fine under deadlines or pressure or high security situations. I'm not that worried. I'm not that stressed. Like that might be different. Like if my life was literally a 9 to 5 grind, I had
Mm-hmm.
like a full family, I had dependents, I had all this stuff and dealing with all that crap. Then on top of it, maybe. But the way that I've set myself up now, it's pretty stress free. So I'm not too worried or too stressed at the moment.
Um, all right, so that's your background. And one of the reasons I wanted to get you on was that you're like the only one of the only people that called the market dump back in December of 2021. Um, which by the way, I mean, you didn't, not that people, my listeners know that like had to sell Bitcoin to buy a new house. And before I got the equity out, it ended up with a phenomenal trade because I sold it at the end of November. But I thought I was getting screwed. But you were one of the voices where I was like, maybe it'll be okay. Because you kept saying it was going to dump, it was going to dump. So so what did you see happening and why did you think that was we were going to pull back? Because I mean, to be honest, everybody, I mean, through the whole summer it was like, oh, we get back to all-time highs, it's just going to explode and hit 100K like within a matter of days.
So a lot of why I thought it was going to dump was twofold. One, the macro environment, and two, the euphoria that was going around. Like the euphoria, it's like I've been around for so many cycles in Bitcoin where I've seen the euphoria, I've seen and felt and tasted and smelled how the environment was. And and not only in crypto, but the 2007 and 2008 crash, the dot-com bubble, like smelling that and just feeling the euphoria that's around those markets. It's very not easy to tell, but you can tell when things are in a bubble like state. And people are always like, oh, you don't know it's a bubble until the bubble is popped. Like, I think that's bullshit because I think it's pretty evident. It's just that people are so not wanting to believe it because they want to ride that gravy train to the fucking moon. And they can't detach themselves from the hard reality and their emotions. And so, like, and not only that, Bitcoin is a very, at least up until this point, it might change because now it's more a macro asset. It traded very literally buy the rumor, sell the news. Every single event. The Coinbase IPO, that was buy the rumor, sell the news. That was the dump the first time from this wherever we got to 64K. That IPO'd right after it IPO'd, boom, crashed down to 30K. The very first ETF, futures ETF getting launched, buy the rumor, boom, it launches, boom, we crash. And that's kind of happened over and over and over again in Bitcoin itself. So those are the two main things. The macro, like the smell of the environment and the history of Bitcoin, it really gave me a feeling it's like this is overheated and this is going to implode.
Yeah, I mean, and people were saying you were crazy for saying it was gonna implode. And so it pulled back. I mean, what do you think? Were you surprised that it held, or where did you think it was gonna fall to?
I knew it was going to fall into this area that we were trading at. Because what's the lowest we got? We got to 32.
30, yeah, 32,
Yeah,
33.
I thought we were going to get down to bounce off the 30. But obviously we bounced on the 32, and now we're in that trading range where a lot of the volume has happened throughout the last 2 years has been between 42 and 30. Like that's the majority of where people have bought their coins. Not many people were buying their coins from 48 to 68. Like there's not that much volume that was done in that, or that much buying that was done because it was just very volatile. A lot of the buying has been between the 30 and the 42s, 43, and that's kind of where we're at now. And there's still risk to go lower. Like the macro environment is dog shit, right? And I know everyone's super bullish because they're talking about, oh, Bitcoin is literally the risk off asset, this, and this, and this. Like, there's going to be a day when that's true. And they could be right, because there could be some event that happens that finally switches Bitcoin from a risk on asset to a risk off. Like, in my mind, Bitcoin's risk off, but it trades like a risk on, right? And so you have to be very aware of that. And there is going to be some moment in history in the future where Bitcoin switches from being a risk on asset to a risk off. But unfortunately, it still trades like a risk on asset. And the macro environment is telling me that there is potential for a massive risk off event in the next 3 or 4 months, due to inflation, the Fed being more hawkish, QE being done, raising of rates potentially faster than people think, the Russia-Ukraine story, now China basically talking about buying oil with Saudi and yuan in their currency. So there's a lot of macro events that make me think there could potentially be a bigger risk-off move.
So you're, with all these things converging, you think, that it's where their laser eyes are going to be on for a lot longer?
Yeah, I do. But everyone knows that, or they should know that when you get into Bitcoin, your time horizon is that it needs to be like, you need to have a low time preference, because if you buy, you have to be willing to be in red for 4 years. At least that's what history has told us, with the cycles. I think the cycles are going away for the most part, but like, you have to be willing to sit on a hold, because it is a high vol asset. Like, literally it was at 69,000 or 68,000 in November. And what are we, like 4 or 5 months away from that? And we're almost 40K. So like, we're pretty down in that position. You need to be comfortable with that and not investing money that you need. Right. So just be wary, people. And this is the same thing that people got into their heads about 100K by the end of this year. They're like, oh, there's no way that we're not getting there, and we're going to hit the all-time high of 60, and we're just going to blow through it and go to the moon and all this other things. But that didn't happen, right? And so you need to be at least aware, or have at least think about in your head being wrong, right? Like, as much as I say what I say, there's all the time where I talk to myself in my head, no, I'm not crazy, that there's a chance that I'm wrong. And what am I going to do if I'm wrong, right? So there's a lot of bulls that don't ask themselves that question, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I've been telling people, I mean, this is obviously not financial advice, across the board, but in personal, like my personal life, like my brother and sister-in-law were over tonight, and they're asking me about it, and I actually gave my brother Jeff Booth's book. I was like, you gotta read this. I mean, my brother is just a very he's risk averse. He's an accountant, so like, he's like very, very wary. And I was like, just put money in that like you're okay with not touching for like 5 years. Like, if you can put $100 a month away into Bitcoin, and like, because he would drive himself crazy looking at the price. But I was like, that really is where most people should try and live. Like, you need to not be like, I mean, you get on zero fiat is one thing, but you I don't know, you have to be mindful and be careful and be willing to live with it. Like, I was like eager to earn a bear market badge. I was like, everybody else had lived through it, and I was like, come on. Like, I had a very enjoyable parabolic run, and I went through the whole phase of the mania and thinking like, oh my God, I'm a genius, this is going to work forever. And I think Michael Saylor and I had a very similar path, obviously very different scales, but like timing wise, I was like, it was the kind of riding that same wave. His was just in the billions of dollars. And so like, I kind of was wary, like, I was like, I like Michael Saylor, but do you think he's just like too much of a permabull, or like, got in and it was like, of course it's going up forever, Laura, it's going up forever.
Yeah. Yeah. He's usually right the way that he frames things. The only problem is he's talking about it with a 100-year time frame. Like he's
Yeah.
buying this
Oh,
as a
yeah.
reserve treasury asset for his company that he wants to be around in 100 years. And so you need to look at that. So like the way that he's talking super bullish is correct, because like his time preference is 100 years. Like this is not for him. This is a
Yeah.
legacy for his company and all this other stuff. So there's no reason not to be bullish like that. But the only problem that I have with those Super Bowls that even have that super low time preferences, they can't admit it in certain periods of time that Bitcoin is a lot riskier to buy than other periods of time. Like, for example, when we were at 69K or 68K, it was a lot more risky to buy Bitcoin than it is right now. And a lot of those Super Bowls will never admit that. They will only say it's any time is a good time to buy Bitcoin. It's today, and the next best time, or the best time was yesterday, and the next best time is today, or some bullshit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so like that's just bulls being bulls. And that's not just in Bitcoin. Like there's people, talking heads on CNBC and all CNN and all these other money shows like Jim Cramer. It's like, ooh, I love that stock no matter what. Like
Yeah.
the whole financial industry is built on being bulls, because that's the only way that they make money, right? With retail money, is being a bull and always being a bull. The good news is bulls are right 90% of the time in this market. It's the way that the Federal Reserve has set things up, the Keynesian system. If we're not growing and expanding, we're imploding, right? So it's basically a cheat code. If you close your eyes and just throw money into the S&P index, you're going to make money, right? And so they've built that entire industry on that. And for the most part, you're going to make money, right? But it's just like you need to have at least some self-reflecting on, and being able to admit that, like, if you're a bull, and this is not just for Bitcoin, that if we're in a bearish scenario, is like actually admitting, like, yes, this environment is bearish. We're in a bear trend, like just admitting that. Even if you're a bull, just admitting that. But so many people just can't do that. And like I'll jump, like I'll be a super bull-tard like sometime when I think it's appropriate, and then when I think there needs to be more caution, I'll go to that side. I'll flip flop, right? And that totally is dictated on the market and the macro environment. Like obviously, it depending on who you are. Like if you're literally someone like, I don't care, I'm just going to buy Bitcoin DCA forever, that's fine. That's a really good strategy, because you're probably going to beat out 99% of the people that try to time the market, right? But you just need to have the nuance and the self-reflection to realize that, like, sometimes better to buy Bitcoin than other times.
Yeah. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, and I think maybe, I don't mean to frame it that like I think Saylor's wrong, but then people take that information and he's looking at it the right way, and they're thinking about it in like a 2-month frame. Like we're going to be back in 2 months.
That's my biggest pet peeve when it comes to Bitcoin influencers on Twitter, building a brand or even products around saying big numbers for engagement and getting clicks and potentially making money off of that. Because you can't control how someone invests their money. And if you're out there giving financial advice, which people are, because when you say Bitcoin's going to this by this date, that's financial advice. And you might say this isn't financial advice, but that doesn't get you off the hook. Maybe it might get you off the hook legally, but when it comes to morally, that doesn't get you off the hook. If you're shelling at the top of your lungs, Bitcoin by 300K by the end of 2021, and someone goes and believes you and is like believing in you to be right, and they go and leverage long or do something and lose their money, you can't just sit there and say, well, I said, no, this isn't financial advice. You're getting people wrecked. Like, it's okay if you have a price target that's somewhat reasonable in a time frame that you're saying. But if you're saying stupid stuff like 300K by the end of this year or whatever you're giving, that's crazy. Like, you're being irresponsible to not only the community, but yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I take it you're not a fan of the stock to flow model.
No, like that. He literally built an entire brand on a broken model. And it's broken for a couple of reasons. Fundamentally, it's broken on mathematics because what a financial model is mathematics. And the actual math behind the model is wrong. That's one. And two, it fundamentally misses the entire demand side of the equation. So yeah, stock to flow is useful to see an asset's reserves and how much new supply comes in. But when you try to start modeling that into a price projection, he's literally trying to steal like stock to flow, which has been an actual model for years. Like, okay, how much of new supply is coming onto the market compared to the existing supply? That's stock to flow. But then naming your thing called stock to flow and trying to put a price projection in that and missing out on the demand side. Did stock to flow know that we are going into a global pandemic where global banks were going to print trillions and trillions of dollars by a certain date? No. Like, there's so many existential things that happen in the world that change the demand supply of the demand of Bitcoin and everything that happens in the price action. It doesn't equate for that. So like, is it useful? I don't people that really don't like going at other influencers because it hurts their brand and they all want to kumbaya and get the self clicks and all that shit. Is all they'll say is all models are wrong. Some are useful. And I'm going to say that model is not even useful because stock to flow has existed forever. And you don't put financial and projections on top of it. Sure, teaching people what stock to flow is, what actual stock to flow is, that's useful. But trying to put that over top of a price projection, to me, is dangerously irresponsible. How many people did Plan B get wrecked? Like, probably quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, because it's, people look at it and don't really understand it. I mean, frankly, I early on didn't understand the lack of that stock to flow wasn't a price projection. and
Yeah.
and looking at it, like saying they're going like, oh hey, like look at that, it goes right in this line and it's just going to go up. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I try to relive. I mean, it's hard to like go back and like think about where you were when you were learning about different things, but like, I mean, I think I had enough. I was listening to enough of the right people on different podcasts that were like, kind of like, whoa, and like make sure, like, I told my wife whenever we got all into it, which she was like, she doesn't want to hear me talk about Bitcoin. That's why part of the reason I started the podcast. And she's like, I trust you, just go with it. She got that far and she was like, okay, it makes sense. But I was like, this is going to be for like, our retirement. Like this is to, for the next phase of life. This isn't for right now. And this isn't just a savings. I was like, it can be life changing, but we got to wait. So we kind of had that low time preference. And I think that plus, like, I mean, just different people, I can't even think off the top of my head, but I know because I feel like it was a dangerous trap. Like I was like close to falling into that and being like, oh my God, it's going to hit 300K. Like I'm going to like, I should, over leverage myself and like take out a second mortgage and, all this kind of stuff. And
see, yeah, like you're the prime example of someone that almost was irreparably harmed due to people on Twitter either projecting crazy numbers or putting models to it and all these things. It's like there's actual stories, Cory, that people did that and then got wrecked because of that.
And then they lose everything, I mean, like, that's the sad part is like they lose their livelihoods,
Yeah. And what are these influencers saying after the fact? They're like, well, I said this isn't financial advice. It's like, you're saying that like it gets you off the hook morally, which it doesn't, because nobody's deaf or blind. They can see what you've been telling people for the last years, and literally and then you say, oh, well, I told him it wasn't financial advice because it's okay. It's like, no, like that's not a escape hatch that you can use here. And there's so many people that are using that. Like, for example, if an actual registered financial advisor said half of the shit that Bitcoin influencers said, they would lose their license. They would be fired on the spot for saying half of the shit that Bitcoin influencers do. Because they have fiduciary duties and they have all these regulations to say that they can't do this. But when it comes to just being somebody on Twitter that may or may not even be verified, and they're saying things like this, like they're actually probably reaching more people than financial advisors are, and actually even potentially more money they are, just on how decentralized and widespread Twitter actually is, or all their other social media accounts. So they're getting away with it. It's the same thing with like ICOs and NFTs and people shilling all this stuff. Is there's no repercussions because there's no legal format for them to get caught yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so do you think that's what a lot of the framework that's coming in legally, that's going to start kind of wrapping that stuff up and getting people tripped up in that?
That's going to be hard because we've only seen the SEC actually ever go after massive people like Elon for saying stuff on Twitter, or for another regulated institution that is on a public market saying stuff on Twitter or whatever. That's the only time I've ever seen them going after those people. And then when it comes to Bitcoin influencers saying stuff on Twitter, they're probably never going to get targeted because by law enforcement or by anyone, because there's no regulating body over the free speech and all this stuff, and they're not going to get after. So that's the bad news, right? The shitcoiners and all the NFT people, there's probably going to come a day where that no longer exists because they're deemed probably securities. And if you actually have an ICO, you're probably going to be targeted rather harshly and probably taken to jail, because you can say whatever DeFi is doing or whatever these altcoins are doing adds value or not. That's fine, but you can't argue that they're not issuing unregulated securities, right? Because that's what they're doing. Like, there is an expectation of profit on the back end. That's the Howey test. And that's why Gensler has basically almost come out and said that like almost all of these coins classify as securities. Whether they have the resources to go after them and when they plan to go after them is a different story. That is still yet to be unwritten.
Yeah. And now, so I also wanted to ask you about the Volcano Bond, because actually Luke and I recorded just like a rip, me and him talking last night, and we talked about how the Volcano Bond, all the stuff was coming out, and I was like, I think I'm talking to Magoo here soon. So you were one of the people that has been all over that. So explain to people. I mean, I don't even understand it that well. So explain to people, the Volcano Bond. El Salvador came out with, they obviously made Bitcoin legal tender, and then they were going to sell bonds to mine Bitcoin off of their volcano energy. And run with it. And how did you figure out that was going to fall apart?
Yeah. So initially what happened was obviously El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender, and where, quote unquote, by law, you have to take Bitcoin at your place of business, which is still not happening in El Salvador for the most part. But I personally don't like legal tender laws because I don't think forcing anybody to take anything as currency is a good idea. You need to let the free market do that. But as it comes to the Volcano bonds, let me give you a little back history on El Salvador itself and Bukele specifically. They are in big debt. They have been trying to negotiate with the IMF for the last 2 years, maybe even 3 years now, about a new loan from the IMF that was $1 billion. It's not just a coincidence they're going after $1 billion with these Bitcoin bonds. They are trying to negotiate $1 billion loan with the IMF. And the IMF, which the IMF always does, was trying to force their hand on making El Salvador change certain things in El Salvador, right? This is the whole big brother of the IMF and what it does. It's the loan shark of sovereign nations. And it is basically Western and G7 countries trying to control the entire world through the handcuffs of the IMF loans, right? Like I'm on El Salvador's side with that. The IMF is not in the good of people in most countries. They want to make you a debt slave, and they want to use that to control you and to have control of your country without actually having elected officials in their country. So they were having problems with IMF because they did not want to budge on doing things in El Salvador to get this loan. And Bukele, obviously Jack Mahler went into El Salvador with Strike because there was something called Bitcoin Beach, started off as a grassroots movement. And kind of he got introduced to Bukele, and it kind of exploded and turned into Bukele thinking that he could do something really big with Bitcoin, made it legal tender, and then said, hey, we're having issues with the IMF. Let's see if we can actually raise funds from the free market. That's going to be a lot more favorable to us than having to listen to the IMF and all their bullshit. That's all good and dandy. That sounds good to me. But the problem started when they started linking with partners to help them develop this quote unquote volcano bond, the technology stack that it runs on, which would be Liquid. Blockstream would be developing that. That's fine. But then they chose Bitfinex to be the prime broker in the bond auction. That set off a lot of red flags. That's the very first thing in my mind that set off the red flags. Like, whoa, I need to look into this deeper, because everybody knows the history of Bitfinex, them bouncing all over the world, basically as they're getting kicked out of jurisdiction after jurisdiction for doing things not 100% by the book, being sued by the state. I think it was the state attorney in New York, a whole bunch of different things. And we all know that Bitfinex's parent company, Ifinex, also is the creator of Tether. We know all the Tether stories. I don't want to get into those, but we know the shadiness of Tether and where they've been bouncing around the world as well. Are they backed? Are they not backed? Who knows? What are they backed with? Actual dollars? No. Corporate paper? Probably. Bitcoin? Other things? Yes. And that's a lot of controversy in and of itself. And so when they went to Bitfinex and got them to be the prime broker, I started thinking to myself, I have zero confidence in Bitfinex doing the due diligence on the counterparties in this bond auction that are going to be fully KYC'd. They know exactly who these individuals or entities are. They're going to do proper AML on the money coming in, meaning they're going to actually ask for proof of source of funds. Where did this money come from? No confidence in Bitfinex to do that. And so I started thinking to myself, oh, that's interesting. They're getting the shadiest company in the crypto industry, I think, or one of the shadiest companies, to be the prime broker, where there's probably going to be a lot of foul play happening. Okay, that's one strike. And then I'm like, sorry. And then I was like, okay, how are these bond coupons going to be paid? And what is the currency that they're taking as a form of payment for these bonds? Oh, they're taking Bitcoin, USD, and USDT, Tether. And then I thought to myself, so you're telling me the prime broker of this bond auction is also going to be the creator of the creator of the currency that they're going to take? What's stopping them from just creating that tether and buying the bonds, or giving that tether to somebody else and then buying these bonds? Nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's no trust in Bitfinex to basically trust that it's a legitimate auction and that this is real. So not only is there questions around Tether's legitimacy with what actually is it, Bitfinex being the shady company they are, doing the proper KYC and AML, but then them taking Tether as form of a payment for this. And then I looked, oh, how are you going to pay out the coupon? Oh, we're going to pay it out on Tether on Liquid. Oh, so you're paying the coupon out. But who is the developer of Liquid? Blockstream. Who owns part of Blockstream? Bitfinex. So you have this love triangle of the currency where the payments are going to be paid into and paid out of, the prime broker and the technology company are essentially all in the same company. They're tightly linked. So there is so much conflict of interest there. I was like, holy shit. I don't think I've ever seen more conflict of interest in my life. And I've seen a lot in the financial industry. That takes the cherry on top of the cake. And then what even made it even shadier is that when they launched these Volcano bonds, or the announcement, you had Samson Mao get up on stage in El Salvador saying, hey, someone asked him, where is this $1 billion going to come from? And someone on stage said, oh, don't worry, Bitfinex has a lot of whales. And it's like, so it's going to be the Bitfinex whales. Like, if you actually know who the Bitfinex whales are, it's all Asian money that has basically been trying to be extracted from China around their capital controls into Bitcoin to get out of China. So I'm like, okay, that's even shadier. So what I thought and had an inkling of is like, it seemed to me that they were building one of the best money laundering schemes of all time, like where you can get basically anyone around the world that has Tether, no matter where they got it from, to go to Bitfinex as a prime broker where they're not probably going to do proper KYC or AML, take that Tether or potentially even print it themselves to buy these bonds that it was just so much conflict of interest. I was like, holy shit, this is a red flag. And then as of late, we've seen an article came out, basically someone claiming that El Salvador is no longer doing the Volcano bond themselves. They are issuing it through one of their state-owned energy companies in El Salvador. And someone did a little bit of digging and basically came up with the financials for this company, basically showing that they would never even be able to pay the coupon on the bond, let alone everything else that they're promising. And the only reason why you would push this bond to an entity and not a sovereign state is because they're either not confident that they're not going to default on these. And so it's different when a corporation defaults on bonds versus a sovereign nation. If a sovereign nation defaults on bonds, it changes everything. But if one state-run company in that country defaults on bonds, completely different thing, a lot more manageable, right? And so there's also a big risk of El Salvador actually defaulting on their existing bonds they have out in the market right now. They've been shooting up quite high lately because people think they're going to default. So it just brings so much into question of what they're really doing. They've been kind of shady with the information they're giving. When is this bond auction going to happen? What are the details in it? All this stuff. They haven't been coming forward with it. So everything to me is a huge red flag. Like, I'm not saying all this is true because I don't know for a fact, but just looking on the outside, looking in, there is so many red flags where I said to myself when they first came out, like day one, when this came out and I looked into it, I'm like, this isn't going to happen. Like, there's no way this can happen the way that things are structured. And especially with the geopolitics that are happening right now, somebody is going to tell them, no, you're not doing this, because if you do this, say bye-bye to any IMF loan that is ever going to come to your way. So many things, like, people look at the United States, as much as I don't like this, the United States just canceled Russia over invading Ukraine. Do you not think, and you have El Salvador that is literally trying to game the US system. They're trying to issue a US dollar denominated bond and basically do that with no KYC or AML on that. And they think that there's not going to be any repercussions on that. And people don't realize how much power the US actually holds over El Salvador. El Salvador's economy still is 99.9% run on US dollars, remittances that are coming into the country. All the United States has to do is shut those remittance corridors off. El Salvador literally starves within like a couple of weeks. And I don't want this to happen because I love El Salvador. I love the people there. And don't want them to actually get hurt, because at the end of the day, we all know on these big geopolitical scale events, whether it's Russia raiding Ukraine, at the end of the day, the only people that actually get hurt are the actual people that live in those countries. The people that live in Ukraine, now the people that live in Russia, everyone's getting hurt by this, right? Just by because government actions. And at the very best, I think Bukele is not overstepping, but he's overzealous in thinking that what he can do and actually accomplish it. Or two, he is foolish and thinks he can do this and pull things over the wolves of people's eyes and do some really shady shit. That's two. And then I guess I'll give him a third option that I don't give him credit for, but he could be smart. And this whole Volcano Bond could be a complete bluff to go back to the negotiation tables with the IMF. So that could be another option. But we'll see what happens. But now them shifting this or trying to shift it, not confirmed, but them looking like they're going to shift this to another entity and not the state, not the country itself, that brings up a lot more red flags, in my opinion.
So, I mean, everybody should be taking these volcano bonds with a big grain of salt. And because not only that, but Americans can't even buy them. Because guess who the prime broker is? Bitfinex. Bitfinex cannot service American citizens. I think the only country I think in the Europe that they can service, I think, is the UK and I think Malta. I think those are the only other two. So if Americans aren't buying it and Europeans aren't buying this, where do you think this money is coming from? Right? Like it's pretty obvious to me, right? Like, so, and they said that they had $1 billion waiting to invest. Like, okay, why not just do it? Why are we waiting on this? Yeah.
Like,
why are you waiting to use?
Yeah.
If the money's sitting there, just buy it.
That's what I mean. And so that leads me to believe the money's not sitting in there anymore. Like, I don't want to like have conspiracy theories, but now with Russia being canceled and there's a lot more scrutiny going on with money movements around the world, that could be a reason why they've delayed this, because they're not able to get that $1 billion anymore.
Yeah, that it could all be connected. Not to put the as Luke does, the tinfoil hat on, but it could be backfiring. You think with there might be money coming out of China to buy these bonds. I mean, which, by the way, like, so I don't know if I've ever explained this to people before, but like, I remember like the most shady proposal I ever heard from somebody about like movie financing. I'm in the US, but like somebody I knew in Canada, they were like, oh yeah, we get all this money from China. And I was like, why? He's like, yeah, it's just people trying to like get their wealth out of the country and get their kids out. So, they send their kids with like a bunch of money to Canada. They set up a production company and they just give it to like any producer walking down the street. So there's like all these like not good movie producers getting like millions of dollars to make movies. And it's just literally like being set up to gain citizenship and basically like I was sitting there, I'm like, is this like money laundering? Like, holy shit.
That's exactly what it is, Cory.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, so this is like, they're just using these like, like dumb producers to like be the vehicle. And like, they're like bragging to me about it, like, isn't this great? And I was like, well, first of all, I wouldn't be bragging about it because it's like, sounds like it's not legal. And second of all, you haven't made a good movie yet. Like they're like I think they might be targeting you because they want movies that don't do well. So
that's the thing, Cory. They don't give a shit if it's a good movie or not. They honestly don't even care if the movie's produced, because all they care about is getting 50 cents on the dollar. And like, that's money laundering 101, right? And there's all the rumors. as well that Tether is actually backed by Chinese corporate paper, Chinese US dollar dominated corporate bonds or convertible notes, because we know for a fact, and like this is not disputable, that Tether does not have $80 billion sitting in a bank account somewhere. How do we know that? Because no one will give them a bank account. Like they don't have a bank account to hold dollars. But so this moves them to, okay, we can't hold dollars. What's the next best thing? Let's try to hold actual reserve assets like treasury notes, bonds, and all this stuff. They're probably not able to get access to US treasuries or US bonds. So what's a market where they could buy corporate bonds that is probably not that well regulated, where they're able to hold these bonds? China, right? So that's why a lot of people think that Tether's backed by Chinese corporate paper, and it makes sense to me, and that's what makes sense to me with this Volcano Bond as well. Is people looking to get their money outside of not necessarily just China, but people looking to get their money outside of the country that they're in. And what's an easier way? By going to Bitfinex and trying to buy these bonds that are going to be on a completely unregulated platform, which is going to be developed by Blockstream and Liquid. So it's, to me, like pretty easy, not easy, but a pretty brilliant way to launder massive amounts of money. And it's not just a coincidence that China has just gifted El Salvador, I think, $150 million soccer stadium. Like, I live in Latin America and I see the Chinese influence. I see what China's trying to do with Latin America. They're pumping money into agricultural projects, soccer stadiums, all this stuff that China's really trying to get a foothold in, right? And so what better way to get billions of dollars into El Salvador, not just from the government, but from the citizens? Like, there's going to be a lot of Chinese influence. So like, that's been like the MO of what people have tried to doing in China for the last 20 years, to get their money out of China. Because realistically, in the Chinese economy and the market, if your money's in China, it doesn't really exist. It's like a fugazi. Whether it's the real estate for building the ghost cities, whether it's actual dollars, whatever it is, at any given moment, that can be snatched away by the CCP, like at any moment. Like, so it's real until it's not real, right? And so that's why a lot of Chinese nationals, and they're not bad people, they're trying to get their money out of China because they know it's not really their money until it's out of their country. Yeah.
So it's basically it's the only way that you can really get good people to, meaning the people, the Chinese nationals, that to get them to do something illegal, like launder money, because that's the only way they can actually take ownership of it. Which, I mean, it's kind of funny because, you look at Bitcoin in China, and all of a sudden there was this thing that people could own, and they could actually own it outright. So I don't think it's a coincidence. I can't believe it took so long for them to ban the mining. I saw that soccer stadium for El Salvador, and I was like, ugh, don't like that. The old Michael Scott, he's sitting there like,
don't like that.
Don't like that. Like, it's not a fan. I think I was like probably a month away from becoming like pure fanboy of like everything in Bitcoin, and I kind of was like, wait a minute, like I'm really glad I pulled back, because it's just like, this is a wait and see game. And take care of yourself, and not that you don't want to look out for others, but like, you can only warn people so much.
No, that's true. You can only warn them so much until they despise you, right? Like the amount of hate that I get for saying bearish sentiments, or even on the El Salvadorian bond, like you wouldn't believe how many like El Salvadorians on Twitter, like after like I negatively talk about it, like lose their minds. And it's not, they think that I'm actively trying to attack their country, which I'm not, because I love El Salvador and the people there. I'm actually trying to look out for them, because if they stretch their neck too far out into this geopolitical game, they're going to lose their head. And do you think it's going to be the upper class in El Salvador that hurts? No, it's going to be the middle to lower class that gets hurt. And I don't want to see them get hurt. Like, that's why I voiced these opinions on this volcano bond. I think this is too ambitious of a play at this stage in the game for where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think Honduras is the next one that's going to announce legal tender?
So they're number 2 on my list. So after El Salvador went, I'm like, the next country is going to be Honduras. And so I think they're number 2 on my list. If any other country, they're basically dollarized, I think they're going to be the next one. It's not going to be Panama. It's not going to be Nicaragua. It's not going to be Costa Rica. And yeah, it's probably going to be them.
And do you have to run, or do you have a minute? I wanted to poke on the Russia China stuff. So what do you think? I mean, this is like more, I mean, it's less of a Bitcoin discussion, but I mean, what do you think's going on with Russia and China, Ukraine? I mean, like something, like a lot of people have been talking about the death of the petrodollar, and obviously that is what happened. And it's funny. I mean, I think I mentioned this with Luke last night, but like, I moved out to the country, and I have like 8 neighbors sprawled out over many acres. But one of them, when I met him, I told him about the petrodollar system and all that kind of stuff, and then he was like, "Oh," like he texted me the other day. He goes, "Did I read this right? Is this going down?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." So I think a lot is premeditated. And
100%.
This has been planned for a while. Because and you have to be careful, because you're like, I'm not taking the bad guy's side, but like, if you are Russia and China, do you want the US to control the dollar, or the,
Bingo.
Do you want them to be able to control? Like, I mean, that's the biggest sword you can wield in the geopolitical world. And so it's like their way of like angling to get off the petrodollar. And then, like, I'm telling you, man, the red flags whenever I saw Saudi Arabia didn't take Biden's call, I was like, oh shit, like this is not good. Because I mean, not that we should be supporting that the Saudi Arabian regime, but like that was that means it's going down. Like, they were the ones that like basically used us, or what's backing our ability to be the strength around the world. So what do you think is going on? I mean, it's kind of a very broad question, but
so I kind of agree exactly with everything you're saying. I think Russia invading Ukraine has not nothing, but very little to do with actually Russia invading Ukraine. I think this is literally the opportune moment to set off a set of events that have been planned for a long time by Russia, and probably also China in cahoots with Russia. And like, the one thing that I hate the most, and like this goes back to Twitter or anybody, these people that are so afraid to actually think about something critically, that like, if you talk positive about Russia or not going along the narrative of that, oh, Ukraine is fighting the good fight and Russia is literally about to go bankrupt. Like, if you say that, I'm sorry, but you're probably brain dead, because you're literally just eating the news that people are feeding you and just regurgitating it. And I'm sorry to tell you, but the news that you're being fed is disinformation, because what's actually happening in Ukraine, one, is you're losing to Russia. Like, this is not a magical thing that we think that Ukraine can hold out. They're not going to hold out. Russia, if they want to take Kiev, they're going to take Kiev. The US and the NATO countries have basically already said, we're not getting involved. We'll give you money. We'll give you weapons. That's it. We're not declaring a no-fly zone, because that means probably nuclear war with Russia. Anyone that's asking or demanding that we institute a new fly zone in Ukraine, you're literally asking for nuclear bombs to go off. You're an idiot. And the United States knows that, and they're gently saying, no, we're not going to do that, because they're just not, right? And so Russia eventually, however long this takes and goes on, they're going to do and get exactly what they want. But what I think is that it has very little to do with getting anything in Ukraine, and it has more to do with setting off events, which is getting off the dollar system. It's not a coincidence that Russia has basically sold off all their US dollar denominated debt and their treasuries and their bonds, so they have none. So the US can't use that as a weapon against them. And then you see, oh, Russia and China just signed a trade deal in euros. Oh, Russia or China and Saudi Arabia are talking about doing oil deals in the yuan. Oh, India is talking about doing trade deals in Russia with the ruble. Like, all this stuff is happening pretty quickly here. Like, it seems like it's linked together because it is. And you're even seeing India. People are asking India, you need to renounce what Russia's doing. And you're seeing people in India standing up and saying, go fuck yourself. India remembers like 1971. India remembers 1982 when the United States backed Pakistan when they were fighting India. And guess who vetoed in the Security Council to go against India? It was Russia. Russia helped India. And Indians don't forget this stuff. And India is saying, like, US, this is your problem. This is not ours. Don't expect us to hurt our economy and our people because you're fighting with Russia. Like, they're already telling the United States, no. Saudi Arabia won't even pick up the phone. China is doing what China wants to do. So, like, it is all a house of cards that are coming down now of countries being like, you know what? I don't want to use the dollar anymore to do my trade. And other countries now around the world are seeing what they did to Russia. Oh, you think your FX reserves are a reserve? Oh, they're gone. Your FX currencies are nothing if someone could take them, or gold stored somewhere else, or any not self-custodial stuff. They can be taken from you. And, like, do you think China's sitting back and looking like, oh yeah, we totally want to be on a system where the United States, if we disagree with them at anywhere in the future, they can just weaponize the dollar against us? No, they don't want to be under the thumb of the United States system. And they're literally a rising power that is getting to the point where they're almost too big for the United States to actually wield that weapon. Because now you're going to see with Russia, if Russia does survive this, and I'm not saying that they do, but if they survive this, it's actually going to hurt the United States more than it's going to hurt Russia, because it's the first country to completely be sanctioned and still be able to survive on a global economy and off the dollar system. That is going to stand as a shining beacon to other countries that it can be done. And then you start losing the hegemony of nations willing to buy US treasuries. Like, this has been happening since the 90s. Russia has not wanted to be on the dollar system since the 90s. And this is literally decades of planning, I think. And this is another thing that people talk about Putin. They literally want to equate everything that he's doing right now because he's crazy, which in my mind is so irresponsible. You're literally trying to shove decades and decades of geopolitical tensions and events that have happened over and over again and strategizing. You're trying to sweep all of this under the rug and just say, oh, this is because Putin's crazy. Putin might be crazy. He's an evil dude. He's obviously doesn't care about human life. That's obvious. But to just say he's doing this because he's crazy, I think is very irresponsible, because if you don't actually understand why something's happening, you're never going to be able to counteract that. If you just think, oh, he's crazy, that's why it's happening. You're not actually looking critically at the situation like, oh, this is why he's doing it, and this is how we can counter it. They're just saying, no, he's crazy. Like, let's just call him crazy and just sanction him and be on our way. So yeah. I completely agree with you. I think this is a lot. I think that this could probably be the most important geopolitical event since since Bretton Woods, like in the end of the World War II, like bigger than COVID, bigger than 9/11, bigger than the Cold War. I think this could be the beginning of a geopolitical events that are going to be way bigger. Like I think that this is a point, a precipice where countries now are going to try to get off the dollar system.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the US and like a lot of the West that is like sticking right by our side. It's like we got caught with our pants down, you know what I mean? Like we're just sitting there arguing over like the stupidest stuff. I mean, brilliantly manipulated us to all this infighting and distracted us, and it's just like all of a sudden, I mean, even people think I'm talking specifically about Biden. I mean, it is like across the board, the politicians are such a joke. And, I think that the rest of the world's like, okay, yeah, no, like you guys are a joke. And we're not it's like a reality show. We're like, you guys are a reality show. We're actually doing something here. And all of a sudden, it was like Biden's like, oh, I gotta give a call over there, make sure everybody wants to stick with the dollar. And I think it's over. I think it's done. I think they're moving on from the dollar. And and you get enough people that stand up and do that, it's gonna unravel quickly.
Yeah, you could actually see while this is happening, you could see the dollar actually strengthen in the short term just because of the uncertainty and certain people wanting to run to the dollar, not those nations, obviously, but other people running to the dollar for security and strength. You could see it in the interim actually strengthen, but the long term, this is its final inning, I think. You're going to see, like, it's not a coincidence that Powell was talking about when he did his interview with Congress, or whatever you want to call that, his testimony, whatever you want to call that. He was talking about the potential for two reserve currencies. And a lot of Bitcoiners like, oh, he's talking about Bitcoin. Like, no, he's not. But what he was actually alluding to is the reality that some countries are going to stop using the dollar as the reserve currency and it has a reserve status. And there's going to be another currency that rivals the US dollar in terms of global hegemony and being accepted everywhere. Whether that's the Chinese yuan, whether it's obviously not going to be the ruble, they don't have the high enough GDP, whether it's some type of SDR situation between India, China, and Russia, or whatever that trade federation ends up looking, there could potentially be another reserve currency that rivals the dollar in that realm. I think that's what he was talking about, and the reality of that's probably going to happen.
Yeah, and really, I mean, for Bitcoin, we just have to be patient. I mean, somebody asked once in a Twitter space, what's your biggest fear with Bitcoin? And I was like, my biggest fear, honestly, my really only fear with Bitcoin is that I won't be here. I won't be, it'll be way beyond our generation that sees it become the world reserve currency. Cause people are like, I mean, Luke's a permabull and he thinks it's going to, I don't know if he said he thinks, the price is going to be huge by 2030, which is probably right. But, I don't know if he thinks this, but, other people think it's going to be the world reserve currency. And I'm like, I don't know. Take my time here.
Yeah. My timeline is probably 80 to 100 years. So if you get some gene therapy there, Cory, you might be able to see it happen.
Yeah. Well, hey, Magoo, I appreciate you coming on, and yeah, it was insightful, and we'll have to do this again because I could keep asking you questions for, even though it's 12:30 at night right now, I could keep going and just drag this out.
One time we should have me and Luke on at the same time, and we'll have, obviously we have different opinions with the timeline, and Luke being a permabull. So it's always good to have kind of contradicting thoughts in the same pod.
I was trying to get him in, but he is such an old man. He goes to bed so early. Like he's on the West Coast, and he was like, I told him, I said, yeah, it's going to be 11 o'clock my time, 8 o'clock yours. And he was like, That's too close to bedtime. I was like,
Oh my God.
When he was in
That
Australia, we were on like the same sleep schedule. But
yeah. Yeah, he's too busy with those BBLs. I think he's lying to you. He's not going to bed.
yeah, he's got those silky smooth legs. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
true. Short shorts.
all right, Magoo, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Oh,
have a good
tell
one.
people where can they follow? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, you just follow me on Twitter at Hoddle Magoo at Hoddle Magoo. It's pretty simple to follow. So just give me a follow. I shit post geopolitical talk, macro talk is usually what I talk about. So if any of that sounds enticing, give me a follow.
Awesome, thanks. All right, guys, that'll do it for this episode. I want to thank again Bitbox for sponsoring the show, and glad to have them on board. And I will catch you guys next time.